Greetings to everyone. In this presentation, I am going to touch upon postmodernism. Postmodernism actually started in the field of architecture. According to Jens, a famous architect, it started in the year 1972 with the demolition and destruction of Pru-E housing scheme in America. But later on, it has spread across and influenced various other fields such as art, culture, literature, fashion, and communication. Hence, it's rightfully called a multifaceted phenomena. There are two different directions in our study of postmodernism. We can look at postmodernism from literary perspectives. We can look at postmodernism from philosophical perspectives. Postmodern theories, which largely fall under three categories: culture theories, literary theories, and social theories. These theories are technically extensions and reflections of postmodern philosophy. If you look at postmodern philosophy, it's a critical reaction. It's a critical reaction to modernist thinking and to the impact of modernism. If you look at modernism, it has been influenced by 18th century Enlightenment period. Thanks to that influence, there are certain assumptions constructed. Assumptions related to science, knowledge, learning, logic, rationale. Modernists were thinking these things going to change our ways of life. We can bring in better understanding of life thanks to these influences. Based on these influences, constructions were made. Constructions of culture, history, identity, and language. Are constructions based on modernist thinking with reference to culture, history, identity, language. All these constructions have been severely damaged and questioned by postmodernists. Postmodernists, with their entry, started shaking the foundations of these modernist philosophies. There are certain questions we got to remember. Postmodernists keep asking some disturbing questions. The most important disturbing question is this: how do we get perceptions? How perceptions are managed, promoted, preserved, altered? What are the factors influencing the perception? Is it possible to have an objective reality of the world? What's the role of language in terms of understanding the realities of the world? How can the structure and the language influence our consciousness? These are the questions which are very central in our discussion here. So, perception management, perception shift, perception promoting values, these are the things being discussed in postmodern studies. Now, let's look at certain philosophies related to postmodernism. The first important thing is connection between language and perception. Postmodernists strongly believe that we are limited in our own experiences. Objective reality and impossibility. Reality is a construction. Language and structure determine our understanding. This is Wittingson's philosophy. Structures and language determine our understanding of the whole world. So, the whole understanding based on the language structures that we have. I am not capable of understanding the world except with the structures that I have. Hence, there is a role, we have to accept this role, the role played by language in terms of promoting our understanding. Hence, the limitations of my language actually are limitations of my knowledge, which means the knowledge construction possible thanks to language. Also, postmodernists strongly believe that the subject matter does not belong to the world, but it belongs to the words. Subject is limited by the language that I use. It is not an absolutism. It's not something that I can talk about. It's something for which I need to have language to talk about. Hence, these postmodernists they have a beautiful way of understanding our own sense of being. Postmodernists strongly believe that we don't obtain the sense of being, as it is implied in the copula, just by observing things that we are capable of observing. For them, there is nothing worthy of observation at all in this world. But in turn, we get to understand our sense of being only through reflection, reflecting upon a sign or a word or a thought. Hence, for a subject, there could be many different predicates attached. Subject becomes true of it not because subject is a subject here, but because a predicate attached to it. This we call sense of being. So we get to understand the sense of being only through language. This is a phenomenal understanding. This understanding actually created a context wherein we started looking at the ways in which we're understanding things rather than looking at the world of reality. The question here is, the words that we use do not have inherent meanings. The words are getting meanings only from the context. The context include the person communicating, the people with whom communication done, the context where communication managed. These are all the factors which contribute to development of semantic properties. This is postmodern understanding of reality. Hence, postmodernists strongly believe it's impossible to have an absolute understanding of the world that we seek to know. There are lots of limitations here. Hence, our perceptions are limited, our understanding limited. Language is causing all these limitations. Hence, there could be possibility of multiple perspectives, multiple ways of thinking. Truth, absolute truth, is an impossibility according to postmodern thinkers. We have only perceptions of truth. We have only multiple facets of truth, but absolute truth in absolute sense, in absolute language, it's an impossibility according to postmodern thinkers. If you look at the factors contributed to postmodern thinking, there are so many different factors, but I can classify these factors in 3 levels. The first one is the shift. What I mean by shift is the power shift from Europe to America, from Eurocentric approach to American perspective. So that shift, the power shift, necessitated a condition. Thanks to that particular condition, our perceptions actually changed. Whether we like it or not, this is a political way of understanding postmodern philosophy. This is the first influence or the first factor. The second factor is the aftermath of the Second World War, the dehumanizing experiences that we all people have been subjected to, the death and suffering, the death and destruction, the loss of human values. All these things complicated our understanding of the world. Because of this, we have lost our hope, we have lost our faith, we have lost our meanings. Our words are emptied of the meanings. Hence, the purposelessness, the meaninglessness, the multiple perspectives, these are the contributing factors. You will find instances of this in the writings of Beckett. Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, a classical example. The third factor, consumer capitalism. Frederick Jameson advocates this presentation. Because of the market economy, we have lost our individual cultures, we have lost our individual identities. National identities completely wiped out thanks to this consumer capitalism. These 3 are undeniably factors contributed to postmodern philosophy. If you look at modernism and postmodernism to understand in what way postmodernists differ from modernists, there are lots of things modernists and postmodernists share in common. Take, for example, modernists actually, they don't believe in the distinction between the high art form, the low art form. The distinction blurred. But what the postmodernists have done here is they accepted there is no distinction. They rejected there is no distinction, but they didn't stop there. They went to the extent of mixing it up. Mixing high art form with the low art form. They did it very mischievously. Why did they do it? They did this only to convey a message that the work is not real. Solidity of meaning, reliability of perception, these are the two factors influence this particular technique. They have done it in two different ways. They adopted these techniques in two different ways. The first way is pastiche. Pastiche is actually imitation of classical works. It was done in order to appreciate the great classical representations in literature. But later on, over a period of time, the postmodernists, with their mischievous interest, what they did is they made some changes to the pastiche. Pastiche has become parody, which has resulted in comic effect. This is how postmodernists, thanklessly, without any gratitude, they have done greater damage in constructive or deconstructive sense of the term to modern philosophies. If you look at postmodern themes, there are three themes. The first one, fragmentation. The second one, discontinuity. The third one, decenteredness. Fragmentation, discontinuity, these are the themes even modernists actually share with postmodernists. But the difference is, modernists like T.S. Eliot and all, they were lamenting, they were feeling very sorry that the society completely defragmented like this. There is a discontinuity. They were feeling very sorry about it. And they wanted to create a structure, utopian kind of structure. They wanted to present a model. They wanted to present an order. In order to present that order, they created the concept of disorder. They created a concept of disorder wherein lots of other people have been othered. The cultures other than the central completely othered. So there was a tension. The tension between the margin and the center thanks to this approach. But postmodernists, they went to the extent of decentralizing the whole thing. They are thankful to Derrida for this contribution. The tension between the margin and the center, that has been negotiated. You will find classical examples of these in Margins of Philosophy and Writings and Difference by Derrida. Whittingham, as I quoted before, also contributed to this particular understanding. Whittingham also supported Derrida's ideas, talking about language and structure, how these two things are limiting our own perceptions. So these are all some of the important philosophical foundations of postmodernism. If you look at postmodernism today, there are no less than 3 or 4 versions of postmodernism. There is one version supported by Eagleton. You will find instances of Eagleton's philosophical understanding in Illusions of Postmodernism. Eagleton is suspicious about universalization of values. The universalization of values would result in totalizing philosophy. Totalizing philosophy would result in totalitarianism, which is a danger to our society. This is Eagleton's perspective. Lyotard, whose phenomenal work is Postmodern Condition, a report on knowledge. Here, Lyotard questions the grand narratives. There are grand narratives. These narratives are not true. These narratives are actually a particular culture narrating its own story. Every culture narrates its own story. That story may not be true. Hence, he questions the reliability, the acceptability, the authenticity of grand narratives. Within this particular grand narrative framework, we can bring in so many other issues. For example, post-structuralism and postmodernism meet only in this point. Post-structuralism rejects that grand narrative. Post-colonialism rejects that grand narrative. Post-feminism too rejects this grand narrative. For example, in post-colonialism, the grand narrative is Eurocentric approach. That has been rejected here by Lyotard. Similarly, feminism, there are many different versions of feminism. Feminism applied in one context may not be applied in different contexts. Hence, grand narratives of feminism rejected here. Post-colonialism, the narratives, imperialist narratives rejected here. Hence, this is one point at which postmodernism and post-structuralism meet. Frederick Jameson, the cultural logic of late capitalism. He talks about postmodernism here. He calls postmodernism second and third phase of capitalism. It is Marx's approach. He talks about the market economies, the capitalist influences in our understanding of the world of realities, how we have lost our identity. He talks about that. Then we have presentations and we have illustrations in Baudrillard. He talks about simulacrum. Simulacrum is a fake reality which has been sponsored by media. You will find narratives right now in media, the discursive practices in media, creating make-believe situations, misleading people. This is the focus here in Baudrillard's version of postmodernism. If you look at all these different versions, be it Eagleton's version or Lyotard's version or Frederick Jamson's version or Baudrillard versions, all these versions suggest only one thing. There is no one single narrative. There are plenty of narratives. There is no one single absolute truth. There are multiple perspectives of the truth. So if at all postmodernists have done great thing, I would say the great thing would be they try to democratize the ways in which we look at the world. They try to give individuals the liberty to feel, the liberty to express, the liberty to practice the things they are comfortable with. So multiple perspectives appreciated. Postmodernism rejects the concept of global culture. Global culture is a creation. It's a construction. It's a construction by the power. It's a political power's construction. Postmodernism rejects the global culture. It in turn encourages local culture, local sentiments to be appreciated. Why do we actually appreciate postmodernism? The simple reason is that, when we actually focus on one way of narrating the story, one way of understanding the world of reality, the world will be a very dangerous place because there will be a political power which will be influencing that particular way of life, that particular understanding. All people should subscribe to it, otherwise they'll be completely othered. Postmodernism questions that and disapproves this. Finally, coming to logic, postmodernism strongly believes that there is no logic at all. Logic is illogical. I cannot have a proper understanding of logic without understanding human feelings and sentiments. According to postmodern thinkers, the statement is like this: true logic can never be a motivating force. It becomes a motivating force only when true logic is subjected to human feelings and emotions. Once pure logic subjected to human feelings and emotions, it fails to be pure logic. So according to postmodernists, a logic becomes successful as a pure logic only when it is subjected to human feelings, emotions like this. If it is subjected to human feelings and emotions, it can't be called pure logic. Hence, there is no pure logic. There is no universal logic. There is no universal narrative. We need to celebrate multitudes of narratives, multitudes of perspectives. Only then the world will become a beautiful place to live in. Before I leave, I'd like to let you know there are 3 phenomenal works in the field of postmodernism. If you like to start your reading in postmodern literature, please start with Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, and Joseph Keller, Catch-22. These are the classical novels which would give you perspectives on postmodernism. Thank you for listening. See you back again in the next session. Goodbye to everybody.